Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be talking about Heartsteel, a very fun but also pretty flawed item, which is why we're seeing it built a lot less and on very few champions over other tank items and just in general. So let's get into it. Heartsteel has a pretty basic stat line. It's got 800 health, it has 20 ability haste, and it has 200% health regen. This is fairly negligible. The 800 health is the main selling point of this item, and the ability haste is quite nice on top. This item costs a lot though. It costs 3,200. And with this, you're mainly buying it because of the passive and the stacking mechanic, and hopefully a huge amount of scaling going into late game. However, the mythic passive on this item is terrible. It gives around, so if you're looking at 2,000 to 3,000 bonus health, which is a fairly average amount for a Heartsteel user, this is about 20 to 30 per item. It's really bad. So by the time you've hit your fourth item and you've hopefully scaled to this magical point at the end game, you're looking at only 80 to 120 health. It's not a lot. It's pretty bad. And size is pretty valuable when you have champs of skill shots which can be increased in size by it. Something like Tom Q increases its length when you get more size. But overall, it's size. The main kind of like fault of sizes, it can be used to block allies from being hit by enemies, like clicking wise. But if the person's targeting correctly and just overall playing and your tank is playing where they should be, you're not usually seeing the tank standing on your marksman, who is the main target and why you'd want this size. And overall, size has downsides. Being bigger makes you easier to target. Your hitbox is bigger. And overall, it's actually a fairly minimal buff, if anything. So, the mythic passive basically doesn't exist on this item. Health, when you have this item, the health is becoming a lot less valuable. So, and yeah, it really struggles with this. For example, Radiant Virtue, 200 gold cheaper, has a pretty good stat line, 400 health less, but in trade you get armor magic resist. The main selling point of this is the team fight potential you have with it. The maximum health gain of 10% is pretty huge, combined with the healing and the cooldown reduction, also really nice. The mythic passive on this item, however, is really good. 100 bonus health per item is really nice for an item like this. It allows you to go into a lot of resistances and end up pretty tanky in health as well. So by the time you're hitting your third, fourth item, 300, 400 bonus health, you have around the same stat line whilst losing very little out of the mythic passive. So overall, you're comparing the two things out of the damage amp and the overall team healing and ability haste, and most of the time this is going to be better. Your maximum health is going to be increased by 10% if you have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 health, something like that, 300, 400. This is going to provide almost the exact same value as the amount of health you're permanently gaining from this item. So you're looking at the heal and the basic ability haste, and compared to the damage, as for tank, your responsibility isn't really to do damage. This is a lot more valuable for a cheaper price. It's one of the big downsides of this item compared to Radiant Virtue, which is why hopefully they will make them more varied in what they do. The issues of this item is it has to be built first. If you're wanting to stack health throughout the game, you have to build this item very early on, because the more procs you get in, the quicker it ramps. The more health you get, it increases the amount of health. It gives back more the more you get. So you do need it early on. You can't really give this item second. So like if you're going Sunfires first, you can't really build this second. You can. It just won't be anywhere near as good, and it's not. I would not recommend it. Building Radiant Virtue at that point is significantly better. It struggles to curve into the next item. This item gives you just a lot of health. It doesn't make you particularly tanky to one resist. The health, like if your enemy laner is going something like Bork, Divine Sundara, they can burn you down really quickly with this item, and it can make it really hard to farm with. And overall, this item doesn't give you any farming benefits. It just increases your health. It doesn't have like a Barmies on it or a Sheen on it, something like that. So overall, you're going to struggle to come into your next item unless you're getting a lot of kills, which that is the main way of using this item. You have to snowball with it. If you're not snowballing with this item, which is harder and higher elo, then it's actually really bad. So you will mainly see this item plat, diamond below, something like that. So you can actually build it up and carve later on into the game. you are limited to 1 resist for most of the game. If you're only getting your second item as a Sunfires or an Abyssal Mask, you are tied to that resistance for the rest of the game. So if the enemy has very split damage, the amount of damage they do, then you're going to really struggle into one type of damage, and often that damage will then burn you down, or the damage which you've itemized against will build LDR, Shrouders, something like that, and also burn you down pretty quickly. So that makes it really hard to play on from 20 to 30 minutes when you're trying to build into your second item, build into your third item. You can go pick up Mercs and Steel Caps. Steel Caps are pretty bad at the moment. They are only good into very certain champions. You can go pick up things like Warden's Mail to reduce the impact of it, but that leaves you on a Warden's Mail, and unless you're like using a huge amount of mana, Frozen Heart doesn't make for a great third item unless you're playing specific champions which go like Thimblewinter, where the mana has another reason for it, and the CDR and the Warden's Mail passive is really good, where it's like an Argot you're against, Warden's Mail is really valuable. You can pick up an early Warden's Mail, and then pick up an Abyssal second if you have to itemize a decent amount of magic resist. There are options, they're not great, and if you're picking up that early Warden's Mail, you will stunt your Heartsteel, so it can be quite bad. It's countered by lots of anti-health stacking items, things like Divine Syndra, Borg, and just in general LDR, Leandries. All these items really burn through this item quite quickly. You are very squishy. For a tank, you are squishy at this point. You got to think of it like a Night Harvester. You are getting one big damage proc off of it, and you are just health past that. So the proc is like Night Harvester, and whereas it's AD instead of AP, and you can only really, it has a ramp, whereas Night Harvester is instant. If it had a Night Harvester kind of effect where it was an instant proc, this item would be a lot better. I hope it does, because like better players are able to read when this item is about to proc and then back off, disengage, and then keep trading like that. And overall, it makes it harder to proc in high elo. Maybe make the range bigger from 700 to 900, something like that. Cho'Gath, well, some of the champs which can utilize this item are Cho'Gath. He does have a better time building AP or Sunfires into. But a lot of these champs which goes Heartsteel actually have a better time going Sunfire's Rush into various other items, whether it's something like Radiant Virtue, whether it's something like Titanic as a second option. And then at that point, you're not going Heartsteel because the item will take too long to ramp, and you'd rather go Sunfires into Titanic, into something like a Thorn Mail, or if you're into Magic Resist, you need Thorn, stuff like this. So overall, Heartsteel is usually just a skip. Even though it's the most popular item, it's very fun. I don't disagree with this item. It's probably the most fun item they've added to the game in a long time. There are better options. Something like Radiant Virtue on Tom is a lot better. You can go this item second, you can go it first. It gives you magic resist, it gives you armor. And then oftentimes your boots are going to be something like Mercs or Sorks or Swifties. And so the last thing I want to cover is how can we fix this item, but with the problems it has. They can make the build, this is, let's say, build path changes. So you can change something like the, change it so it has armor magic resist in it and then reduce the amount of health on it, or make it cheaper as a mythic. It's very expensive at 3,200. If you had it at 3,000, it can make it more satisfying to ramp up. You could also make it more impactful on the amount of charges you get, but that would be a very dangerous way about going with this item, because then it makes it even more low elo skewed if you're just getting more health on the item. And then you could also make the mythic passive have resist if you change the two passives around. It wouldn't help Radiant Virtue, it'd actually be quite damaging towards the item, but this item could really do resist on the mythic passive to make it a more balanced item rather than it's just a lot of health. But it'll be interesting to see if they added more items like Gargoyles, which you could build earlier on where they have both sides of resist. Heartsteel could have a really nice place in the game, but for the moment, with Gargoyles being a far later item you want to go, because it's very reliant on having a large amount of health for the shield value and having bonus resists for the amount of resist you get on the item, it puts it in a pretty bad spot. So thank you guys for watching. I want to know your ideas. What do you think could be fixed about this item? Do you think it's in a good spot? And overall, what are your thoughts? So like, subscribe, and I'll see you next one. Goodbye.